I am very excited about this session, partly because it has, I was going to say one of my friends, but I know he's going to be rude about that, just to preempt that. But we've got Steve Parish, who's the chairman of Crystal Palace Football Club, and Mark Bright, who was a former player, but is now the loans manager and head of development for Crystal Palace Football Club. The reason I wanted them to come and talk today is they're going to talk about the Academy. I feel like I've lived the Academy for some time, Steve. I've known Steve for a long time, but I also share offices. Well, I rented offices from you. It was a sparkle in your eye and is now very much a reality. So we're going to talk about that today and how you've put well-being, performance right at the heart of everything that you're doing. We're going to kick it off with a film, so if we could just run the VT, and then I'm going to hand over to Steve.
Welcome to the Crystal Palace FC Academy, a state-of-the-art football facility providing an elite training and learning environment for 200 young men aged 8 to 23. We are striving to create outstanding footballers and people, to give them every opportunity of achieving lifelong success on and off the field. Away from the pitch, we place an emphasis on the holistic development of each individual player. Our specialist tutors and experts provide education in stunning classroom environments. But education does not start and stop in the classroom, and it is not just about qualifications. We aim to broaden their thoughts and awareness, from cooking classes, charity projects, and workshops on societal matters such as knife crime, consent, and social media. Our players' life skills are enhanced on a daily basis. Our player care team supports players off the pitch, helping with emotional well-being, personal issues, mentoring, and more. And this care is offered to those who leave the club. For an extended period of time in a one-of-its-kind programme in football, as released players adjust to life beyond our academy. In-house psychologists are on hand to ensure players are supported in their journey, in good times and in bad. And of course, the physical well-being of our players is at the heart of our organisation, with state-of-the-art gyms, medical rooms and rehabilitation spaces. And when training is complete, they bond as teams, eat nutritionally balanced food and congregate in a welcoming and comfortable restaurant area.
Wow. Steve, tell us a little bit about what you've been doing and how it came about.
Well, obviously every football club tries to develop its own talent and its own players. But having been involved with the club for 12 years now, a fan since I was 4, but actually involved in trying to affect the club. Obviously, the more you get involved with the young people in the academy, the more you realise, as in life, that there's a whole set of skills that you need to develop to be successful. And the first thing I would say about our academy is it actually goes far beyond the 212 boys that we tend to have at any one time in our direct care. Obviously, the women's team train there, the disabled team train there, of huge events based around our foundation, coaching courses for deprived kids during the summer, etc., etc. So the facility itself is a marvellous facility for the community. But if we come back specifically to the aims around the young people that are in our care as footballers, I think what you see in terms of what we need to develop are all the skills and things that you need to develop probably in a workplace. There might be some very specific ones tailored to football, but obviously generally there are lots of other abilities that you need to be successful either in football or in life. And really we built the facility not particularly for the footballing part, because frankly the footballing talent is kind of built in. So if we look at this next slide, hopefully you can see it up there. We talk about the 5 talents that you need to become a professional footballer. And, you wouldn't be in an elite academy if you weren't technically good at football. I mean, that's kind of a given. You're not going to get there. And to give people some interesting background, players are scouted from 7 to 8 years old. They sign their first contracts. Obviously, their parents sign their first contracts at 9. They're annual contracts, so they've got mobility. If they're not happy, they can move around. They then get to 14, 15, and they sign their scholarship agreements, which is kind of almost a pro agreement. Obviously, there's a fair amount of attrition along the way. That's a subject that's been talked about a lot recently in the media, quite rightly, because for a lot of these boys, there's an enormous amount riding on being successful in football, and they vest, you know, sometimes too much in that, which is why it's very important that we build a good, solid education program to supplement and give them different skills and different options should the football not happen. The statistics are pretty harsh. You know, of the elite academies, of which we are one, what they call a Category 1 academy, you're looking at something like 1.5% of the footballers that become pros, so not even the footballers that go through it, the ones that become pros, there's massive attrition even before you get to that will play up 20 games or more in the Premier League. So what we need to make sure is that the experience that you have in our academy not only prepares you to be a footballer, but prepares you for life. And every single person that goes through our academy should look back and say, okay, maybe I didn't make it as a professional footballer, but that was a fantastic period of my life, you know, and I wouldn't be the person that I am if it wasn't for that. So, you know, we're trying to develop these 5 talents all the way along the journey, and you can see 2 outstanding players that have come from our academy through different eras. Gareth Southgate, who you saw opening the academy facility, the current England manager, an inspirational figure for many, many, many people. He was in our academy from 13 years old when it was a very different place, portacabins and waterlogged pitches and lots of adversity. And there's something to be said for that. You know, there's something to be said for you know, people that have developed out of those kind of difficult environments. Obviously, as you can see now, it's moved on, and I think one of the things that's a slight misnomer, you know, is that everybody in a football academy is underprivileged or has a difficult background. The truth of it is you have an incredible diversity of backgrounds. You know, you have kids that come from hugely wealthy, well-to-do backgrounds, and you have kids from, you know, very difficult backgrounds. And interestingly, also the problems then aren't easy to spot. So it's not as simplistic just to say all the kids from difficult backgrounds, you know, that financially less well off have problems, and all the kids from the wealthy backgrounds don't. That's not true either. You know, often, you know, you can see the reverse. So, you know, we're working on all of these talents with the boys. You know, obviously the basic ones, physicality. So, and you know, maybe your footballing ability won't quite get you there, but you can run 12, 13, 14 kilometres regularly in a game, you know, and that's a talent that you can turn into a career, you know, even if you're not necessarily technically good at football as some of the other boys. Obviously, a lot of what today's about and the things that Suki is involved in is about, you know, mental health and mental strength. And we couple that with social skills and social development. So one of the things that we see with our boys is that they're completely at home on a football pitch. You know, that's their domain, that's where you live. If you go and play football with them, they'd be the boss. You know, they'd be telling you what to do, they'd be supremely confident. When they leave that environment, sometimes life's a lot more difficult for them. Maybe, you know, they don't go to the best school, they're not having the best time educationally, maybe they're just not used to the kind of environments that they will suddenly have to become used to, dealing with the sort of people that they need to deal with if they suddenly get success at 16, 17, 18 as a professional footballer, the money, the lawyers, the agents, all of these kind of people. So you saw the restaurant area, for example, very simplistically, members of staff have to eat with the boys so that the boys learn to interact with adults. We try and make sure that everybody at the academy doesn't wear a tracksuit. We try and make sure so that they're used to dealing with people that, you know, dress differently to them, that they're not cocooned in this, you know, just football world, that they're suddenly going to leave at 18 and then suddenly a world where no one wears a tracksuit. You know, they need to be able to deal with figures of authority. You know, we want a very diverse and inclusive environment, not just, you know, for the sake of it, but because we want the boys that aren't going to make it at football to look at the club secretary or the lawyer and recognise that that may be a career path that they could take afterwards, that their choices aren't just football, coaching, and maybe, you know, something that's not quite as good for them. And then obviously we try and instill in them the fact that you're not going to get anywhere in life without hard work. And, you know, it's difficult often with the more talented boys. You know, the more talented boys obviously find it easier to get picked as they go up through the, you know, the way that I often explain it is if you think about watching an under-18 game of, I mean, we finished third in the under-18 league, we beat Chelsea twice this year, we beat Arsenal twice. So if you're watching that game, Palace-Arsenal, what you've got to think about is 90% of those boys aren't going to play professional football. You know, as good as they are, as fantastic a game as that is, and often it comes down to a lack of desire and the inability to work hard. And trying to instill that in, I mean, look, we all know in every walk of life, unless you have family wealth, you know, I've yet to meet anybody who really got anywhere in life without the desire and the hard work. And that's probably the most difficult ingredient to instill in the most talented boys. But in order to do these things, you know, we have individual plans for each individual player, you know, where we work on their physicality, their psychology, and any areas of deficiencies that they've got. You know, they really are enveloped in that environment in a sort of blanket of care and trying to make sure that they have every chance to succeed. And then, as it mentioned in the film, to finish off, at the end of the time, particularly, you know, it's quite attritional. Your under-18 team, typically in an elite academy, 50% of those you're recruited at 9, but they're quite Darwinian academies. You know, kids are leaving because either they themselves realise they're not good enough, or, you know, we sit them down and say at a certain age, look, we think that there may be somewhere else that's a better place for you to go and play, and we're recruiting players in. By the time it gets to sort of 16, 14 to 16, we're taking them out of school at 10 o'clock to train, and then we've got tutors that are backfilling all of their lessons and giving them one-to-one tutoring. By next year, we'll be a full-time school, so the boys that aren't in the best schools will be able to take them on and look after them full-time with their education. So, you know, we've got this whole holistic view of the boys, but obviously there's still this moment for some of them when it gets very serious where they let go. So at the point where they become a pro, or they're about to become a pro, the pressure obviously is extreme, and some of the boys have a huge amount riding on it from their families, etc. So we've now got a 3-year aftercare program where we closely monitor the boys after we've released them, and make sure, but typically we don't hear from them for about a year, because they'll go off and they'll trial at lots of other clubs, and you know, if they make it, great, you know, and we absolutely get it wrong sometimes. And it might be we release a boy because we just happen to have a better one in that position. You know, it isn't necessarily because we don't think that lad can make it, or maybe they can't make it right now. You know, they're a late progressor, and we think that going somewhere else and having a bit of a longer time or dropping down the divisions might be beneficial to them. But after a year, when some of them are finding it very difficult, you know, that's when we really kick in with our aftercare program. And then we're looking at all sorts of different things. There are scholarships in the States, football scholarships. There are different apprenticeships. We re-employ a fair proportion within the club. You know, so we have a jobs and internship program, which is an inclusion and diversity program as well, which fits very well with our, you know, the nature of our, the background of a lot of people from our academy. So we re-employ a lot of them in the club as well to try and make sure they stay involved with football. So, you know, it's an attempt, I think, to really be a kind of gold standard of what you would want from a school, from an employer. And as you can see, the facility itself we've been highly complimented on its design by a lot of people, because I think, you know, if you look at a lot of them, people maybe spent more money, but they're very boxy and school looking, and that's not denigrating them, but, you know, they feel a bit. Whereas we try to create this very friendly, very welcoming, very warm environment for the boys. And the final thing I would say is from a mentoring aspect, and Mark works there full time, so as an ex-professional, you know, somebody who's written a fantastic book, if you get a chance to read it, about his own background, growing up in some cases in a boys' home. You know, he can identify readily with the boys, but we see mentoring as a 24/7 holistic, everybody's involved in it. You know, we're not great believers in mentoring is, as much as it's useful, is bringing in a pro for one, you know, hour-long session to have a chat to the players about his experience. That's useful and can be helpful, but really they should be getting, you know, guidance and teachings and learnings and examples and role models every single moment of every single day that they're in the academy. So we try and surround the academy with positive people that give out positive information and understand the psychology of the boys and the things that they're going through.
Wow, thank you. Gosh. And I think the two things that strike me there is one, that when we see those youngsters playing, so few of them are going to go on to be professional players. And then that thought around mentors constantly being there. You know, we kind of go, oh, well, I might do 2 or 3 sessions and then that's it in business. But that's, you know, that could really revolutionise the way we think about business mentoring, actually. Mark, as a footballer, how different do you think it would have been for you if you'd gone to an academy like this?
I mean, first thing I have to say is congratulations to Steve, because when he took over the club, he had a vision and he said, we've got to get the academy going. My immediate thoughts were, let's get out the Championship and get in the Premier League. But Steve said, long term, we've got to get the academy. We're in a great area of recruiting. So to now see it in its fight, it's amazing. Yeah. It's like been a journey. And also Steve also said that we can't have these kids from 8 to 18 and then just dump them.
Yeah. They
don't make it. And I said, that's the way it's always been, Steve. The best get through. He said, I know, but we're not doing that. We need to do something else. We need to help them and assist them. And like I said, we've re-employed lots of players who didn't make it, analysts and coaching, etc. on the staff. But no, it's an amazing facility, fantastic. But in many ways, in our day where we didn't have all that, it toughens you up. And it's kind of the things that helped to make you, because it was hard and tough and you didn't have all these things. But now when Wilfred Zaha came across on the opening day, and that was the first time he'd been to the academy to see it, and he just went, wow, how lucky are these? Because he grew up with the portacabins and things like that. Yeah. So even when the seniors came across and saw the facility, it is amazing, but it would be great. The facilities, the 3G pitches, the pitches that, you know, we spent £1 million on a pitch, the show pitch. All the facilities are better. The coaching's better. I mean, the education system is better. So would I have got any further in my career? I'm not too sure, but it would have been great to grow up around this kind of environment. Yeah.
I mean, Steve alluded to your book, From Foster Care to Footballer, and you talk about, I mean, you had an extraordinarily tough, you know, when I read it, that's a really, really tough childhood. Quite a lot of rejection. And you also touched, Steve, on that kind of moment of rejection within football. How did you cope with that? And how do you use that kind of learning to help those boys, you know, cope with that rejection? And girls, for that matter, you know, which we'll come on and talk about as well. But what do you do? And but talk to me about how it felt for you at the beginning.
Obviously, the book was a few years ago, and I know Steve won't want me to talk about the book. He's bringing it round to me, that's what he'll say. But no, you just have to survive. You just have to be tough. Players were treated differently. People were treated differently. I think that how we were treated by guardians is not how we treat our kids. We're very light with them, very soft, where we would, like you know, was quite firm. So it was just a coping mechanism. Rejection pushed you on. It inspired you a little bit. You just said, right, I'll prove them wrong. That was my way of dealing with it. But you can use examples to the players nowadays of Jamie Vardy rejected by Sheffield Wednesday, Harry Kane rejected by Arsenal, Eze rejected by 5 clubs. You can use these modern day players and say, right, if you get released by Crystal Palace, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the end of your career. It could be the start of a new journey, a new pathway. So I try and talk to them about that. I tend not to talk to them about my book or anything like that because they're so young. They ask you if you're any good. They're 2000 born or something. They say, were you any good, Mark? Yeah, I was all right. But like Steve's right, when we sit there at lunchtime and you go and drop into the tables and then you ask them about what they're doing, you find out loads of things about the players. Like one of the players who's just turned pro, I said to him, you know, what plans have you got? What plans have you got for the future? And you know, sort of thing. He said, I've just bought a property. And he's bought a property in the block right opposite the training ground. Did you know? And I said to him, wow, brilliant, well done. He said, yeah, his agent and his dad and everything supported him and he thought it was a great investment. He doesn't live in it, he's renting it. I said, what? I just was so shocked by the player and it was encouraging as well. So you learn these things about them. If they ask you things about your career, you tell them. And like Steve said, the only advice and the only encouragement I get is you have to work hard. There's somebody underneath you, there's somebody ahead of you. You have to move the person ahead of you out the way to get into the team. And make sure the person below you doesn't move you out the way. Yeah. And it's a brutal industry.
It's still brutal. Yeah, absolutely. Steve, we talk about this a lot in business, and you have it in an even more pointed way. That balance between helping and supporting people. I love the fact you've got those sort of 5 areas that you're caring about them, but also making them hard, making them be able to cope with it. And we get quite a lot in business. We don't want to go there. We don't want to help people with their mental health because we don't want them to be soft. We don't want them to be snowflakes. How do you look at that juxtaposition in a way?
Well, look, I think one of the things that's really interesting for me, when I grew up in advertising, and probably when I first arrived in terms of academies and looking back to Mark, look, Mark is a unique character, genuinely. If you read his book, the things that he came through and the adversity that he came through and the environments that he would have been in. I remember, football environments, it was very sink or swim. It was brutal. It wasn't very pleasant at times. The bigger, stronger, more verbose, borderline abusive people were successful. And if I'm honest, if I go back to the start of my advertising career, I think that could be said honestly about a lot of things in advertising, right? Some of the people that are heroes of advertising, we would, if we could tell you some stories, they were not the most pleasant people to be around, and behaviour in the office, probably some of my own sometimes when I was, running my business, wasn't as regulated as it is now. People didn't realise, the good people didn't realise the effect that they could have on other people by their attitude and by their demeanour. So one of the things I've noticed about this, and I've noticed about football generally, and I've noticed about life, is that people with softer, rounder edges, people that aren't somebody who naturally bully their way to the front, can be successful, right? Because it's a more nurturing atmosphere. And you can see that in footballers now. You can see that in the type of footballers that we're producing in this country. The younger, more educated about social issues, more outspoken about social issues, braver, more articulate, more media ready, less intimidated, more supported by their teammates in everything that they do. And I do think environments help. When we had portacabins and waterlogged pitches, the more talented boys, particularly ones that maybe lacked, the social skills, or came from an environment where, you had to be dominant to survive. They're on that difficult estate, where you didn't look at somebody if you didn't want to fight with them, or, if you wanted to fight with them, you looked at them to stare them down or whatever. That some of that came through into our academy because, it was almost like they were doing us a favour being there because the facilities weren't great. If you come to a place like that, I don't think you mess around, right? I think you work out pretty quickly when you turn up, right? If you mess around, you're not going to stay there. So it lifts the behaviour levels, it quashes the people that, we get them out pretty quickly, people that really you just can't deal with their behaviour. We try and work with them as much as we can, but, if they're intimidating others or they're creating an environment that isn't conducive to people developing. So, I think that's happening all across the workplace, and I think it's fantastic to see, and I think everybody should have an equal chance of success, whatever them, just because they don't push themselves to the front doesn't mean they're not talented.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I love that sort of, approach. But to your point, when you go there, you know how special you are. So you're going to be able to do that kind of hard work. If people have got questions, if you log on to Pigeonhole, we'll see your questions come up here. Mark, Steve just took...
Suki, just point out that obviously I'm the loans manager at Crystal Palace, so I look after the young lads who go out on loan. So now we've got all sort of mechanisms in place for people if they're struggling mentally. So one player he was out on loan, and just try and speak to them, once a week or after games. How did you do? How did you feel? And then watch the clips back. So the last thing to say before I put the phone down is everything else okay? Kind of like a little sort of, and the one player who said to me, no, Brian, it's not. I don't feel great. And that kind of like obviously sparks the reaction then. Okay, do you want to come back? Yes. So then you put the phone down, speak to the sporting director, speak to player welfare, and then we got him back because he just wasn't in a good place. He was quite far away, and he just said he was struggling. And I didn't expect it of him because quite a big, tough character. Yeah. And then we got him back, and then we said he's had an injury, he had a couple of weeks, and then he came back and integrated in the group. And then the player care take over, and the psychologist as well. He goes and had a chat to him, and it was kind of like a really like important moment, I suppose, for me, because I didn't expect him to say, no, it's not okay. Because usually it says, everything else okay? You know, yeah, not bad, yeah, fine. Sharing houses and their own apartments, etc. Because some of them can be overseas, Scotland, Wales, can be anywhere. So it was really important that our team got around him and supported him.
Yeah.
And now he's playing at another club.
Brilliant. That's great. I love that story. And and it is that moment of asking, isn't it? Asking and then listening.
Yeah, you have to ask them all. And plus, the more you get to know the players, if they're in the building and you get to know them like through the lunches and things like that, a little bit more intimately, then I think they will reach out to you, because you want them to, even if it's not to me. But at the end of the season as well, we get the players in a room, we say, could we have done anything better? How did the loan go for you? Yeah. And then you find out that different people from the club are phoning the player to make sure he's okay. And if it's a female as well, they might say something to the female what they won't say to you because of the macho thing. Yeah. So I think we've got it right.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. You've been very outspoken about racism. We saw Jake Daniels came out as gay this last week. It is still a challenge in football. I know you've suffered from it in the past. How does the Academy hopefully help this in the future? And what can we do about it now?
I think they have workshops, don't they? They have workshops where they discuss racism, homophobia, discrimination, and they exchange ideas and views, and we talk about that. I've asked the players before. I asked one of the senior players, I said, if one of the players came out as gay, would he get the support from the team within? He said, absolutely, 100%. Times have changed, times are different now. They would get it, no problem. So I think the guys talk about this. It's better. That's what we have to say. Yeah. From my day, it's absolutely better, no question about it. But there's still a long way to go, as we see weekly. Yeah. You know, black player misses a penalty or whatever. Yeah. Straight onto social media. More can be done on that side of it, social media of guidance. But the players do talk about all these issues. Yeah, yeah.
Steve, what do you think should be done?
Well, look, I mean, first of all, it's a big topic generally in the club, because, it's not just about racism towards black players or players of different origins, but it's also trying to create a more diverse working environment in the other side of the football club, in the business. I'm a great believer. I worked on the FA diversity programme, where we now publish, the amount of people from different backgrounds that we've got employed at the clubs. And, my thing is really that you've got to seed it. My whole issue is social mobility and social connection. So, typically in a working environment, when somebody needs to hire somebody, they either ring somebody they know, or they ring a recruiter that they know, and then who recommends somebody, and then they ring their friends and they, do you know this person? So simplistically, for example, we have a situation where lots and lots of people ask for internships at football clubs and at businesses. I've had a policy, as you know, I never say no. Right, so literally, that doesn't mean everybody can ask me. Right? But,
you're all sitting there, yeah.
But what I've got, a lot of my investors and my friends, are very wealthy, and they're very fortunate in life, and they'll ring me and they say, oh, my son's at Harvard and he's into football stats, and can he come and do 2 weeks? And I'm like, that's absolutely fine, but he needs to find somebody who wouldn't get the opportunity to bring with him, right, or her. Right. So we try and seed at the bottom level into our business, and we're trying to encourage other clubs to do it through the FA, that you have an internship programme that's diverse and isn't just a propagation of all of the people that are in the business. I'm a great believer at the fact that, above all else, people want to hire good people that do a good job, and they're pretty lazy, right? And it's pretty hard to find good people. So, what the young people from diverse backgrounds need, they need a CV that looks like, frankly, the privileged white kid, who's got lots and lots of connections and can get this fantastic CV and all these fantastic opportunities. And if you create that at the bottom, I think then that will rise to the top, and you'll start to see much greater diversity across all of the businesses. So we don't just work at it on the football. And I would say there's a balance, with social media for the players, there's a lot of negative stuff, right? Definitely. But also remember there's a fair amount of positive stuff in that, it's a big a social network is exactly that. It's a big social network. So whereas you might be trapped 20 years ago in a group of friends that did bad things and thought bad things were okay, you know, I'm pretty confident that you know they're not, right, if you're involved in any way in social media. So there's a lot of positivity, and it's about having programs with the boys to focus on that and focus on the positivity. And then finally, I would say, you know, I fail to understand why the you know, Twitter and Facebook allow anonymous accounts. That's the bottom line for me. If we knew everybody, you know, if you abuse somebody in real life or on an email, you know, and you're traceable, you know, you're not going to do it, are you? Or you're far less likely to do it. It's the untraceability of the people that are on these networks. And as soon as we get some accountability from those businesses, and they aren't accountable, and frankly, when we engage with them sometimes, the things that they think are allowed, you know, against some of the things that they ban, quite an extraordinary concept of right and wrong in most people's opinions. So I think we're getting somewhere with that. There's a lot of pressure on them, and we do a lot of work with the boys to make sure that they take the good from it and not the bad.
Yeah, thank you. Steve, Mark, I wish we could carry on chatting all day, but we're not allowed to because the timer says that we've run out of time. When you first went up to the Premiership, Steve, I sent you a text that went, "Well done, Steve, you must be pleased." And you wrote back going, "Yeah, it's great." I now realise, having now spent lots of time at Crystal Palace with you, Mark, and your team, who are fabulous, that was such an understatement by you and such an understatement by me, not really understanding the whole football thing. But I think what you've done at the Academy, I think what you do as somebody who's such an inspiration as well, Mark, and a mentor, is phenomenal. And not only is it brilliant for the next generation of Crystal Palace players, it's brilliant for, I think, everything in football. But I think it's also great for us as business people to understand some of the things that you've gone to, the lengths that you go to look after your players, not just there, but afterwards, that we can all learn from. So I'd like to give you a huge thanks very much. Thanks for coming today.
Pleasure.
Thank you.